Millennials are key to this. This generation has been born into an era of exponential change and disruption, and they can lead the way through their innate ability to adapt. And they are specifically seeking soft skills. That these are the skills that they believed are going to be important as jobs evolve. Things like interpersonal skills, confidence, motivation, strong ethics, critical thinking, innovation, and creativity. And I find it interesting that those are the skills that humans have which can't be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence. They're true to us. For companies to succeed in the 21st century, simply the best place to start is to harness the skills and passions of millennials. And why? Because millennials are poised to reshape the economy. Their unique experiences will change the way we operate, and they will force companies to examine how they do business for decades to come. Younger generations will live and work more flexibly. They'll start their careers later in life. They'll take time out to raise families. They'll take time out to re-educate themselves, and they'll be very proactive about launching their own ventures. And we have 3 examples of that up here. I think that the best part of this, which Irene has orchestrated, is for us to hear from them. You know, what do they value in work and life? What part do they see themselves playing in this 21st century economy? So please welcome Holly Ransom, who is the CEO of Emergent, Elise Apoli, who is the CEO of Capital Chemists, and Allison Green, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pantera Press. Welcome, ladies. So I'm going to start with a few general questions for you all. I guess my first question is, does any of what I say resonate with you? Maybe start with Holly.
I really liked, Cindy, that final slide that you put up around sort of the 3 priority areas that we've all got to be thinking about. I think that really resonates really strongly. That piece around trust is, I think you said it's universal at the moment. We're watching across every country in the Edelman Trust Barometer a real challenge around confidence and trust in the business sector and confidence and trust in our political institutions. But what's interesting is it's markedly more pronounced for the millennial generation. If you look at the Pew Institute's research around this area, there's a double-digit gap between the millennial generation's level of trust in terms of how much lower they are than any other generation before them.
I know that back home, for the people that I work with, it's really important that there's a social cause behind everything that we do. And when we perform well and when we are doing our jobs properly, that is not just replicated in how we look after our team and our people, and it's not just reflected in our profit and loss statement, but it's also reflected in what we give back, both to our community and our teams.
For me, the big thing is actually aligning people and profits. It's the codependence of them together, because often when we think of business, or often when businesses think of business, they think of their financial purpose, and then way over here on the side is their social purpose. It's the things that they do good. It's a separate arm of the business. You know, that's where we might see their philanthropic endeavours or their CSR or their ESG, all of these, you know, buzzwords and acronyms that speak to the social good that they're doing on the side of their business. Whereas I would really argue, and I talk to businesses a lot about this, that the acronym that we're actually looking for is DNA. You know, is that social purpose piece part of the core values of your organisation? And do those profits and people really align together?
Because when you think about purpose and being purpose-led, it's easy to say it, but how do you make it real? A great example. Give us an example where you've seen an organization that's really gotten that right. And maybe at least it's your organization. How did you make it real and not just words?
We are a community pharmacy group, and our pharmacy group sells medicines and helps people with their health. But at the side of that, we realise that we're helping people and we're trying to make communities healthier. And so we have a community program where a percentage of all of our profits go to this community program. And we don't just shove the money there because it makes us feel nice. Then it's actually our teams and ourselves, myself, that go and actually contribute to charity days and go on a fun run, even though I can't really run that well. And, you know, go and give our own time and so much of ourselves to others, because it doesn't really fulfill me anymore. As a millennial, I don't get a really nice warm fuzzy when I look at at my bank account. But I do get a really nice warm fuzzy when I see someone else smile from something that I've contributed towards, or I've seen how someone's life is changed.
I think it gets to the heart of how this is an evolution in how purpose is practiced. And Cindy, it goes to what you were saying, generations are an opportunity to study the way societies are functioning. And this is a credit to baby boomer parents, many of whom are in the room. You're the generation that started this conversation around corporate social responsibility. You started this initiative around the triple bottom line. What I think we're seeing in this next generation is going, okay, where to now? Because in some ways that's led incredibly positive change, and it has. But in other ways, we've seen some negative externalities. We've seen some challenges where maybe that's not quite delivered the impact that we might have hoped. And I think this is where we're getting to the reimagination of how do you live it, how do you partner to do it, what does that look like in 2018 and beyond?
One of the other things that struck me when I read each of your profiles that you have in common is you're all quite entrepreneurial. And I'm quite interested, maybe start with you, Allie. What drew you in to an entrepreneurial way of doing things, which is quite different from, maybe the baby boomers that all went into big corporates and, I've worked for the same company for 30 years. Who does that? But you've all started your own companies. What got you there?
So I never went out there thinking that I actively wanted to be an entrepreneur. I run a social purpose book publishing company in Australia called Pantera Press. So for me, and I think, coming back to what you were saying before, Cindy, about sort of the characteristics of this millennial generation, it was very much about innovation. It was looking at the problem and thinking, what can I do differently in order to take the risk that other publishers can't? And what that ended up being was a very different business model where our focus was zoomed out. Our focus was on investing in the next generation of both readers and writers by, developing a new financial model that allowed us to invest in talented Australian authors who we thought had bestseller potential, both for fiction and also non-fiction, and then use our revenue to reinvest in new authors, but also into not-for-profits and charities that were encouraging the joy of reading and to help close the literacy gap. So it was about this kind of virtuous circle that allowed us to take that risk.
I got the opportunity to become an owner of a pharmacy, and it was a pharmacy that had been there for a long time, like I'd said. And instead of just dreaming it, we actually did it. So if we found a cool technology that could be implemented to better someone's health, we did it. If we had a crazy idea, we just gave it a whirl. And interestingly, despite the generation of our clientele, or no matter how long our community had been interested in our business performing in a particular way or having a particular function that they expected from us, they were so excited that we were just giving it a go. And it created this really lovely vibe that's grown our business, but also grown our team and our loyalty. And it's just been an amazing journey. And now we have this amazing little community of both our team members and our community that follow us everywhere we go.
And you're all about, Holly, understanding digital change and what's happening and disruption in the world, and filled in a gap there, right?
For me, in our business, it's about being a force multiplier behind leaders and organisations that are seeking to respond to disruption and change. Getting in and supporting them with the strategy and the operational side of how they do that. And I get so energised by the period of time that we're in, notwithstanding everything that we've acknowledged, and there are some significant challenges afoot. We're at a point where I feel like we're really called to re-architect so much of the way the world is led and works. That, for me, is really the passion that drives the work I do.
Now, I want to get personal. You've accomplished a lot in your relatively young lives. So when you look forward, how do you define success? If you looked back at yourself in 20 years, what would you have accomplished? Maybe Elise, start with you.
So when I think 20 years ahead, I would like to think that I am continuing to do what I'm doing, maybe in a bigger way, still helping people, maybe in a bigger way than I am right now, but also that every time I make a decision and every time I say yes to something, that it's because I'm trying to be better and I'm hoping that that's going to help another person, and that one day when I turn maybe 120, you reckon? Yeah. And I decide to rest forever, that you're known for that. And I think that's another really important thing to millennials, is legacy and what we're actually working towards in the bigger sense of the world.
But from my end, I think that the overwhelming drive for me is to think that at whatever point, 120 sounds like the agreed year, the going age, at 120, I will have made a significant contribution to humankind. And particularly for me, it's around this re-architecture piece of the way that we lead. I'd love to think that I've played a role in breaking down the silos between corporate, government, civil society, and helping us engage people in solution making and solution creating more effectively than I think we're doing right now.
I guess success for me in 20 years is very much around increasing that impact, both in terms of finding those inspiring people, inspiring others, and helping to close that literacy gap so that the next generation can very much become the leaders because they're being given those opportunities, particularly around education, that are necessary for that. And I mean, I think on top of that, when it comes to success, for me, it's very much still about enjoying what I do. And I'm in a very fortunate position where I wake up every day and love exactly what it is that I do. So success in 20 years for me, or 120 years for me, is hopefully still doing something that I just love and makes me want to get out of bed.
To ask a question, because we're at a Global Women's Summit. Do you see a difference between men millennials and women millennials? I mean, you work and interact, and are there differences, or is it pretty similar? Anybody have a perspective on that?
Being around the G20 conversation around women's workforce participation for about 6 years now, it never ceases to amaze me that we're still almost solely focused on women as employees, and we're still not talking about women as employers and women as self-employed economic agents. I think there's a whole conversation around what we need to do to empower female entrepreneurs that we're still not having to the degree that we need to, how we break down those barriers, how we create more opportunities and pathways in that regard. We've only got about 12.8% of our girls studying advanced level maths in Australia right now in year 12. We've got a long way to go in terms of closing this skills gap, and we don't have the time to be dilly-dallying around about it. This is a really mission-critical piece around not only how we change this in schools, but how we provide reskilling opportunities for women mid-career, because these transition points are going to be really, really necessary. So I think that they're significant, just some of the generational things that I acknowledge that are probably different in our generation that I think we need to be having more of a conversation around.
Interestingly, I'm not sure that millennials see each other that differently. My millennial husband would never think that there wasn't something that I couldn't do, and vice versa. I think the same of him. I feel that everyone should have the same opportunity, irrespective of when they just happen to be born. At the same time, I know that there's tokenism, and that's another thing that gets thrown around a lot. And when I see women performing leadership roles or entering into leadership roles, I want it to be because they actually deserve to be there, and not because there was a quota or a percent that we're trying to, that we're trying to aim for.
Elise, I don't know you all that well, but I've had the privilege of getting to know you. I watched you accept one of the Telstra Business Women Awards last year, an amazing recognition of the contribution you've made in business. Yeah, a round of applause for that. It was great. In my mind, you would never, ever, ever be capable of being token. And if it was a quota that got you in the door, that gave you an opportunity to be at a table, I don't believe for a second there's a problem with that. I think that's fantastic that we had something in place that allowed you to be at the table, because never would your contribution be token.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
I want to go to a topic I'm passionate about. We've talked a lot about purpose, but I believe in well-being. And well-being is critical if we're all going to live 100 years, right? We got to take care of ourselves. So, and this I think is incredibly important also to the millennials. So, Elise, what are your thoughts on that?
This is something that's really close to my heart, because well-being isn't just, being able to physically move around. It isn't just being able to get to work. It's so much bigger than that. It's about your headspace when you're at work. It's about your headspace when you're at home. And it's about your ability to live a fruitful life in whatever that means to you. It means that we need to find things that make us tick, that make us feel alive, and that will be different to each particular person. But we also need to make time, and whether that's time that your organisation gives you or time that you make for yourself, where you can constantly replenish and make yourself healthier and go for a walk, or watch a trashy soap opera, or whatever you need to do to reset and just keep resetting, because if you just keep running the race, you're not going to get to 100.
Please give this incredible panel a big hand.